The book of Daniel, chapter what? 6. All right. There's been some debate over what chapter I'm supposed to be in, but we are here in chapter 6, Daniel chapter 6. What a blessing. One of my favorite stories of the whole Bible is this chapter right here, and I think it's a very familiar one to all of us as well. And but it's never a chapter that we should say, "Oh, I know that," and move to chapter 7. It should be a chapter that we stay and just meditate in. Today I was telling Diane, I got involved in a couple of things in this chapter, and I started to get, started going, deeper into the research of these words and the people and all that and the events. And pretty soon I realized that time had been slipped away with my study time, and I hadn't even gotten into the whole chapter yet. And she says, last time you spent 20 minutes on an introduction, and then you had to rush through the whole chapter. And I said, well, I'm doing it again tonight. So let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word, and we ask that, Lord, you would bless. Thank you for your word. Lord, how many times we can say that? Because, Lord, your word is alive. It's quick. It's powerful. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. It's able to divide right down to the very intents. It's able to discern between the spirit and the flesh, the emotions, Lord. It's better than life, Lord, that we just know that at the entrance of thy word brings light, as it says. Oh, it's sweeter than the honeycomb. It's more to be desired than gold and fine gold. Thank you, Lord, for it tonight. Speak to us from it. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, chapter 6. Liars, laws, and lions. That's what this chapter is all about. Liars, we can see them right off the bat, and starting in chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. The laws of the Medes and the Persians, which could not be altered. Once a law was signed by the king, it could not be changed. The king couldn't change it. The people couldn't change it. It had to be enacted. You remember when Esther, and in her writings, that King Ahasuerus, when he wrote down this law, they tried to change it. They knew they couldn't change it, but they had to circumvent it. They had to make another law to allow the Jews to fight back and protect themselves, so they could be delivered from Haman's plan. There in the book of Esther, and so we see that the laws of the Medes and the Persians and the lions, of course, we know all about them. And these lions, there could have been hundreds of them in this pen, in this den. After we get through with the chapter, you'll realize there were a lot of lions in this den, because we're going to see a lot of people thrown in this den. And so there were possibly hundreds, and they were all hungry. I mean, they kept them at that point of just at the point of starvation, ready to pounce and eat on anything that would drop into that den. So we've seen, now we've come to the end of, or towards the end of Daniel's life. He's been in captivity pretty close to 70 years. He is in his late 80s, maybe early 90s at this time. And so you got to get rid of the picture of a young man in the den of lions in your Sunday school pictures. He's an old guy. Some people say that, well, that's why the lions didn't eat him. He was basically gristle by this time, and he just too old, to be chewed on. And he wasn't any prime rib or anything to come talk about. And so he was just They were, and some of them were saying, well, these were old lions. And it's amazing when you get into the commentaries and you start reading all these thoughts and why these lions didn't eat Daniel. You begin to think, wow, what is this? And they begin to kind of discount the whole miracle of what happened. And yet the scriptures tell us why these lions didn't eat Daniel. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So liars, laws, and lions can be summed up over this book here. It says that it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom of 120 princes who should be over the whole kingdom. Now you remember what happened in chapter 5. The Babylonian kingdom had fallen. Belshazzar has been taken. His last night in his party, there in the kingdom or the city of Babylon, he is overtaken by the Medes and the Persians. Daniel's interpretation of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had is coming to pass. Babylon has fallen. Now another kingdom is going to take its place, the Medes and the Persians, the arms of silver, and the chest of silver. And so the Medes and the Persians have now moved in. There's, to say the least, probably a lot of confusion going around, mopping up, to say the least, in all over the kingdom. People aren't feeling like they're loyal Persians yet. And these guys, these 120, actually 122, governors and kings and statesmen that were placed in charge of all the providences of the new kingdom of Persia over Babylon, has been trying to organize things. And it says, and over these 120, there was 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first. He was the choicest one. He was probably the most preferred one out of the bunch, as it will tell us, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. The reason why that he's setting up these 120 kings or princes over these 120 provinces, he's put 3 presidents in charge to make sure that these 120 don't rip off the king and the kingdom. That they use the money and they collect the taxes and they take care of the funds in a righteous way. And so that the king, as it says here, suffers no damage. That the people conduct themselves in an orderly way. The taxes are collected in an orderly fashion. Nobody's being overcharged or undercharged. And he picks out 3 men. One is Daniel. Now, it says here, then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So he takes these 3 presidents, of which one of them was Daniel, and he takes Daniel and makes him over all of them, over the other 2 presidents and over the 120 princes. And their people that they would work underneath them, all their administrative staff. And he says the reason why is because the king recognized an excellent spirit to be in him, the Holy Spirit. Daniel is a fascinating man. This man ran the distance. He finished well in his Christian life. I mean, he started out as a young man, purposing in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food. You remember that in chapter 1? And here, almost 70 years later, He's a man of commitment, a man of integrity, a man that you could look and examine his life and find no error, no fault in. And we'll talk about his characteristics in just a second. We talked about him at the beginning of our study in chapter 1, but we'll sum up his life here in just a second as we get towards the end. But it says, then these presidents, and so basically what you have here in chapter 6, verses 1 through 3, you have here basically you can say God's promotion, the promotion of Daniel and these people. You can also say that you can see the honesty versus the corruption that's going on, the honesty of Daniel versus the corruption of these other men, that the king had to put in place things that would catch embezzlement and things like that. And so he sets up this government here. But then in verse 4 we see this plot hatched. Between verses 4 and 9 we begin to see the difference between the believing and the scheming, in a sense. You begin to see the difference between Daniel, his belief in God, and the scheming of these jealous, envious people that have seen a man who has stayed the course, that did not defer from his commitment with God, get totally jealous over this man. And so you see in verse 4, then these presidents and princes, that's all 122 of them, sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. I mean, could a man have that many enemies? Can a man have that many people after him? All these princes and all the two presidents, he says they sought and found occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find no occasion nor fault. No occasion, nothing. He was blameless, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. He was faultless, he was faithful, he was blameless. And it says that then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Now they begin to think, we can't find him stealing, sifting, cheating, doing something. We can't find him in some way of morality to accuse him before the king, to bring him down to our level. And then he says, what we need to do is that we need to bring some way, we've got to hatch some kind of plan that we can put the king against his God, the law of his God. And so we need to find some way. And so they're plotting. Their plot is thickening here, and their jealousy. So then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto the king, live forever. Live forever. He didn't. He actually died a couple of years later. But they live forever. And they're going to say this a whole bunch of times. Every time they come in, they live forever, king, live forever. And I always get a kick out of this. But it's flattery. It's flattery. Beware of flattery. When people come up and speak well of you, it's dangerous. Because you know what happens when we start letting people flatter us is that we sometimes might fall into the thought that we are as good as they're saying. I am good, ain't I? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, we're not. No, we're not. And so, we might think the Bible tells us, beware when all men speak well of you. And it tells us that be careful. When everybody's singing your praises, you're in trouble. Something's wrong. And so watch out. And the greatest testimony I think a believer can have is when your enemies can look at your life, scrutinize your life, and find no fault in you except in a way that they could put you at odds between your employer and God, or your landlord and God, or your family and God. Some way, if they could do that, be careful, because they will. Satan will. The devil will see to it. And so be careful of flattery, that it doesn't get a hold of you. Jealousy also. They were upset. They saw this man get promoted, and they weren't getting promoted. They saw God's hand upon him. Boy, you know what? Paul had the same problem, you remember? Even when he was in prison, people were doing things in ways that would bring more punishment and problems to him while he was in jail. You remember he mentioned that in his letter to the Philippians. He said there are some that are preaching Christ out there just to preach Christ, and some are preaching it for contention, to bring more suffering to me. And there are people that will look at your life and see God's blessings upon it and say, that can't be happening. I don't like that. You know, have you, I don't want you to raise your hands. But have you ever seen somebody really get blessed? I mean, really, really get blessed, and you walk away thinking, oh, I wish it was me. Don't say nothing. You'll give yourself away. But you know what? I've got to confess, I've done that. I don't know, boy, I would, you know. But there's also that thought and awareness that I need to know that if I am being blessed, there are some that are going to actually rejoice, but then there are some that are actually going to get upset. They're going to look at you and they're going to be envious of what God's giving you and blessing you with. And so be careful. Know that it's there. Well, Daniel was receiving both flattery and jealousy was working underneath, and flattery was coming out of their lips. And all the presidents, now they came before the king and said, "Live forever, O king, live forever." All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, have consulted together to establish a royal law, a royal statute. King, we've all gotten together and agreed on one thing. That's a lie. Governments can never agree on one thing. Number one. But number two, they said all the presidents. Daniel wasn't consulted. I mean, they said, "Oh, but no, it wasn't Daniel. Daniel didn't know anything about this." And the governors and the princes and the counselors and the captains have consulted together. Now, I'm just wondering if all the governors, all the counselors, and all the captains were aware of what the princes and the presidents were scheming. And I wonder if they understood what they were trying to implement Daniel into. And so they consulted together to establish a royal law and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, for 1 month, except of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. King, We want to make you a God for a month. Basically, that's what they're saying. We want to make you God for the month. You heard that old program, Queen for a Day? Well, this is God for a month. You know? Now, that's one thing I would not want to be, is God. Believe me, I'm not, and neither are you. None of us are. But can you imagine what that means to be God? That means everybody has to come to you with their problems, and you've got to solve them. Now you think about that. It's not a happy job. It's not an easy job. Only God could really do that. And because we're not, it's going to be an impossible task. But because they're flattering him, and because they're saying, King, you know, the kingdom, this transition that's going on between the Babylonians and between the Babylonians and the Persians, it's not going so well right now. And, you know, if we would just take out all their prayers and all their petitions to their gods and just make them all come to you, that would unify the Babylonians and the Persians and all that. They'd have to depend on you. And so they'd really begin to become loyal Persians rather than defeated Babylonians. And so let's make a rule. And you can imagine they're probably kind of selling this to him a little bit. But here, and it says, now, O king, establish the decree and sign and write the writing. They already drew it up. Just sign the writing here. We've got it already here for you. It's in paper. Let's sign it. That it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which alter not. Now, as I said, the laws of the Medes and Persians, once it's signed, once the king puts his signature on there and stamp, it was unmovable, unchangeable. It was a law. And they start to pressure him. Sign it. Go ahead. We got it right here. Sign it. Just put it in the thing. Now, here's another thing. Anytime anybody comes to you and starts pressuring you to do something, don't go for it. How many's ever gone to a car lot? Do I need to say anything more? Huh? You know, when you go to a car lot, man, they come up there. I just enjoy doing that. I just kind of walk by, I go by Cal Worthington. Just walk by Cal Worthington, and they'll come out on the street for you. I was out for a walk one time, and there was 3 guys that was walking. Hey, you need a car. I said, no, I don't. I've got 2 of them in my driveway. Well, you need one right now. You're walking. And I says, I want to walk. Well, come on over here. We'll get you into a car. I says, I don't want your car. But I couldn't believe it. Just leave me alone. I'm not on your property. I don't want a car from you. But it's just an amazing thing. And how they begin to pressure you. Now, when somebody comes up and begins to pressure you, just back off. God never pressures. If you feel like, somebody comes with a problem, got to do it now, got to do it now, got to do it now. It's got to be done. And you feel the urgency, and you feel the thing that's in their heart and all that. But if they're demanding, people will come to us sometimes with big emergencies. And I need $4,000 today. And I can talk about one that just happened today. I need $4,000 today. And I said, well, who are you? Well, I've come, whatever. And I go, well, wait a minute. Let me talk to you and find out. It's got to be done. No, stop. Don't. Let's see. Let's pray. Let's seek the Lord. And most of the time, God will give you a release. Go and help them. But don't feel pressured. Feel led. Okay? Don't feel pressure, because if you feel pressure, it's not of God. But if you feel led of God, then you're going to get blessed by Him. God's going to say, yeah, here, this is the way I want you to help them. This is what I want you to do. This is what I don't want you to do. And be led by the Lord in this. There's many times where we've gone out to meet people at places. People will call up and say, my car's broke down. I'm from Yuma, Arizona, or something like that. And we're here at this parking lot and stuff. And if you can give us some money, we'll get our car fixed or whatever. And we've helped a lot of people like that. But you've got to be wise about it. Or you'll hear a story that say, oh yeah, we helped this family from Yuma, Arizona the other day. You did? We did too. Yeah, another pastor, yeah, we had one there. The next thing you know, 5, 8, 10, 20 pastors in the city are saying, yeah, we've helped a family from Yuma, you know. And it's a whole racket. But then there's times where we've gotten letters from people and back and say, thank you for helping me to get back home. You know, here's the money you gave me, or something like that. And you realize you really blessed somebody. You know, be led of the Lord. Don't be pressured by people. And that's what they were doing with the king here. They were pressuring him. Sign it. Sign the writing, verse 9, and the decree. Well, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, it was enacted in law, it was there, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he knelt down upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God as he did previously. Beautiful verse. It says, when Daniel knew this, he just went about what he normally does every day. He prayed. Now notice something about this prayer life of Daniel. We've made mention lightly about it before, but he has a place to pray. Notice that? Went into his house. Remember, Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 6 that when you pray, go into your closet and shut the door and pray, so that your Father who sees in secret might reward you openly. You should have a place to pray. Every one of us should have a place, a secret place, a place where we can get away and alone, just you and God, and pray. And to be with the Lord. Daniel had that place. He also had a position in prayer. It says that he got down on his knees. Now, position, I think, is a mark of what the position of your heart is. Sometimes it's a position it's an expression of how you're feeling, in a sense. There's times where, have you ever been in that place where you just feel like the best thing you can do is get on your knees? That you're just humble before God? That you're just submitting yourself to God? There's times where you just feel like you don't want to lay down on the ground because you're just busted, it seems like, or you're just wasted, and the thing that you're going through, you just can't stand anymore, and you just got to get and it seems like the closer to the ground you get is the closest way you can get to God and hear from God. Then there's times where you're just standing there, and it's a picture of you just standing in the Lord. And you're standing in His presence. There's times where your hands are lifted up. You know, there's nowhere in the Bible that tells us to bow our heads and close our eyes. Nowhere in the Bible tells us that. It's just tradition. Now, there's places where we bow our heads. I think that's a sign of reverence. But it's a position. Daniel had a position in prayer. He had a time in prayer. Notice it says that he prayed 3 times a day. 3 times a day. Psalms 55, verse 17 says that I'll pray 3 times a day. Morning time, and the evening time, and the noon time. I'll pray 3 times a day. Matter of fact, it was the habit of the Jews to pray 3 times a day. First at 9 o'clock, morning prayer. And then at 3 o'clock. And then at sunset. And so the 3 times of prayer. And do we have times of prayer? Now, do you set a time of prayer? Do you have a set time of prayer? Do you say, okay, at this time I'm going to meet with God in my place that I have, this place I have. You're going to position yourself to have a time with God. Now, you got to make time, because what have you discovered? If you don't make time, you won't have time. Right? I mean, if you don't make time with God, you won't have time with Him. You need to make time with Him, and that is a daily appointment with God. And sometimes it's 2, 3, 4, 5. It can be, the New Testament way, it can be any time now. There's no set time. You can, the Bible says to pray without ceasing. So you should have this atmosphere of prayer going on. But there's times where you go in and you pray and spend time with God. And just be with Him. But notice I said a time. I didn't tell you how many hours or minutes. Just have a time. Sometimes, some mornings you'll be in there, or hours, sometimes for minutes. Don't set a, quote, time that you need to pray, an hour and a half, whatever. Because you know what? Because eventually, that's not going to make, you're not going to make it. If you say, I'm going to pray an hour every day with the Lord, guess what? In about 30, 35 minutes, you're going to be going, my gosh, I prayed about every single thing I have need to pray about. And I've got to, and all that. And you're just thinking, oh, I need to, well, okay, I'm going to go. Lord, I'll try to make it up next week or next day or something like that. And pretty soon, what happens when you do that is the flesh jumps on you and Satan jumps on you and condemns you. You couldn't even watch with the Lord for 1 hour. You weak thing. And he condemns you. Don't set the length, just the time with the Lord. Notice he had a purpose in his prayer too. It says that and this can be seen towards Jerusalem. You see, the Scripture says in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 28 through 30, also verse 38 and 39, and 46 through 51, those 3 places in that chapter. Solomon, when they were dedicating the temple of the Lord there in Jerusalem, he talked to God and he says, God, he says, if you have ever gotten to the point where you take us and throw us out of the land, and we find ourselves in a foreign land because of our disobedience. Lord, if we turn our faces towards Jerusalem and start to pray, bring us back. Bring us back to this place. And God said He would. And so there you have it, that God says, and so they have a purpose. They had a scriptural reason to be in prayer. Now we have that as well. The scriptural reason to be in prayer, pray without ceasing. Also, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. To pray with all kinds of prayers, supplications, thanksgiving, intercession, prayers for all men that are in leadership and for the church and for pastors. And so there's purposes in prayer. So you have a purpose, a scriptural purpose. And then notice it says here that it says that he did this previously. Just because the law was signed didn't mean that Daniel started his prayer life. But he was in his prayer life. He was always in his prayer life. Matter of fact, that's why the whole law came up, so they could trap Daniel. He was a man of daily prayer. It wasn't something that they were going to have to wait for a few weeks before he has a prayer meeting. It was a daily thing. They knew they were going to catch him that day. because they were going to have the law signed, and they were going to be able to catch him by that night, and they were going to be able to go to the king and tell him, hey, we got a violator here. And that's exactly what they did. It says in verse 11, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before God. How did they find out that he was praying? They were watching him. I mean, they knew he prayed with his windows open, as always. He didn't say, oh, there's a law, I'm going to show them, and threw his windows open. No, they knew he always left his windows open when he prayed towards Jerusalem. And so they were there waiting for the trap being set. They were waiting now to be able to incriminate him into this thing. And so that's exactly what they did. Now, let's say this. You and I as Christians are to obey all the laws of the land. That's what the Scriptures tells us. But when the government creates a law that would be in violation of God's law, that's when, hopefully, we would exercise civil disobedience. We must obey God rather than men. You remember Peter did this, and the apostles. They were commanded not to preach the gospel anymore in this name of Jesus. Remember in Acts chapter 4? They said, don't preach in this man's name anymore. And Peter just told them, said, well, you guys figure it out. Shall we obey God or men? And they knew what they were going to do, and they went out and preached the gospel. They were beaten for it. There was consequences for it, but they obeyed God because God had commanded them to preach the gospel. May we have that kind of courage. See, Daniel didn't shut his windows and kept on praying. Daniel didn't lower the volume or anything like that. He kept on doing just what he always did, and he didn't become a coward because of it. He kept praying. And even though at the cost of his own freedom, he went ahead and prayed. But then it says, then they came near and spoke before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, except that thee, O king, shall be cast? They just signed this law. King, didn't we sign a law that says that nobody's supposed to ask or have a petition to any god except to you? O king, shall be cast, and if they do, they are supposed to be cast in the lion's den. The king answered and said, this thing is true, according to the laws of Medes and the Persians, which cannot be altered. I mean, he's really, yes, that's true. Well, then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel. Can you see the envy and the jealousy and the hatred? That Daniel, who is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petitions 3 times a day. He's not just breaking it once a day, he's doing it 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, were very much displeased with Daniel? No, with himself. He knew he had been snookered. I mean, he knew. He probably thought, put the dunce cap on me, set me in the corner. I have been taken. These guys set me up. And he knew it. He knew he blew it. He was upset with himself. Have you ever been in that case? Where you get used and manipulated in a way, and then when it all comes down, you realize you were the fall guy, or you were the guy that they were used to get to somebody. He knew it. He realized what had happened, and he was upset about it. Well, it says in verse 15, then these men assembled unto, it says, and he labored, it says that he was upset with himself and set in his heart on Daniel to deliver him and he labored all till the going down of the sun to deliver him. I mean, they all the rest of the day he tried to figure out, is there a loophole? Is there a way that we could get this thing taken care of, change this thing? And no, they couldn't. Well, then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, king, that the laws of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king established may be changed. I mean, they had him over a barrel. Nobody can change this, king. Even you. They knew it. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said unto Daniel, Your God, whom thou servest continuously, he will deliver thee. How did the king know that? How did he know that? He knew it from Daniel. I mean, I imagine Daniel probably was such a witness to him. No wonder he wanted him the head over his kingdom, as far as over these two presidents and over the other 120 and over the captains and governors and everybody else. And he realized what kind of man he was. And he says, You're God. And he gives him this word of encouragement. It's neat to have words of encouragement. It's neat when somebody comes up to you and says, Hey, I know you're going through it. And I just want you to know that God's going to take care of you. God's going to bless you. This is going to work out together for good. And they come up there with that word of encouragement, and they just lay it on you, and you just go, thanks. And sometimes it might be a card, sometimes it might be a phone call, sometimes it's somebody just coming by your house or whatever and just say, Hey, I was just thinking about you and just wanting to let you know that God loves you. He cares for you. What a blessing that is to receive. And this is what this king was doing to Daniel. And well, now you got to realize it might have not have been that much of an encouragement. When you hear these these lions down there, and you're going down there, and it's not going to feel good getting ripped up by these lions. And you just, oh man, and the guy's going, Your God's able to deliver you. That might sound real cheap, but nonetheless, it's true. Sometimes people hear us share the words as God will work all things together for those that love the Lord. He'll work all things together for the good for those that love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. And people that are going through it might think, well, yeah, but you're not going through what I'm going through. But it's still true. That's why Paul, when he wrote it, he says, and we know that all things work together. We can testify of this truth. Well, he says, and the stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. I mean, they put him in the den of the lions. Now, this den is a huge pit with the top part where people can actually look down and into and see what's going on in there, but also the pit. Now, according to some people that have studied, archaeologists and theologians and stuff, said that this pit was so big that they had movable walls, actually, that they can lower and raise the walls, fences or whatever, so they can move the lions back and forth, so they can clean the stalls and clean the area, so they can move in one area or another. Now they threw Daniel in there, and he's in there with the lions. He's not behind the fence, he's not behind the walls, but they would have thrown him in there. The king would have talked to him and told him, God's able to deliver you, Daniel, and all that. And then they rolled this stone over the side of it, put a seal over it. Is there any likeness about the tomb here of Jesus? And putting Jesus in this tomb and putting a stone over the mouth of the cave and then putting a a seal over it to make sure nobody changes it, nobody bothers it. Well, then it says here, then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. I mean, he couldn't sleep. He could not sleep. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. They would do all kinds of things to basically keep the king in a good mood. Because normally when a king got in a bad mood, people died, you know. And so they wanted to keep him in a good mood, and he just didn't want to hear any instruments, any music, and his sleep went from him. He fasted all night. He wouldn't feast with them, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early, and this is very early, way before the sun came up, but as soon as he was able to distinguish things in the evening, it says that very early in the morning he went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spoke and said to Daniel. Now this was an act of faith. Because, would you expect somebody to be alive all night long in the den of lions? I wouldn't. But he went. It's an act of faith, expecting an answer. Daniel, O servant of the living God. Now who would have told him that? Daniel. Is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Is your God able? I was thinking about this today, about our God ability. Daniel chapter 3, verse 17, you remember the three Hebrew children? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to King Nebuchadnezzar, our God's able to deliver us from you, from your fire. God's able. He is. Ephesians chapter 3, verses 18, 19, Paul prayed that we would be able to comprehend the depth of God's love and all that, and even that we would comprehend it, His love that's past knowledge. Past knowledge. How can you comprehend something that's past knowledge? Only by God's ability. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, he says, unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above that which we could ever ask or think. God's able. You remember the story of Abraham? The story of Abraham, where Abraham is waiting for the promise of him having a child. Remember that? And it says that he was 100 years old, and Sarah was 90 years old, and they hadn't received. They've had their silver anniversary a long time ago, and their diamond anniversary. They've had 75 years of marriage already, you know. And they're not there. They have no children. But yet, Abraham is told he's going to have a child with Sarah. She's 90 years old. You could ask him, he says, oh yeah, I'm going to have a child. Oh, you are? You married to a young lady? No, she's 90. You know, and he said, well, how old are you? Oh, I'm 100. Oh, really? Is she pregnant? No, she's not pregnant, but we're going to have children. You're going to have children? Yeah, and you probably think, well, he's at least happy, huh? You know. But you know what? There's no way. The guy, you know, that you would really think that this was going to happen, but it did, didn't it? And they called their child Laughter. Isaac. But it says that he staggered not at the promises of God, because he, as you go through this, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 19 and through 24, he staggered not at the promises of God because he knew, he counted God faithful, knowing that he was able to do what he had promised. Do you believe that? That God's able? God's able to do what he has promised? Now, Jude, verse 24, says that he's able to keep us from falling. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 12 tells us that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto that day. Jeremiah was asked by God, "Behold, I have made heaven and earth. Is there anything impossible for me? Is there anything that I can't do, Jeremiah? Is there anything too hard for me?" And the answer is no, God, you're able. So the question to Daniel, Daniel, is your God able? Daniel said, yes, he is. Because Daniel, it says, then Daniel came out there and says, "Oh, live forever, King." He says, "My God has sent his angel." We've got about 7-8 minutes here. I want to finish up real quick. But he says, "My God has sent his angel and has shut the lion's mouth." I mean, he sent his angel. Now, we don't know who this is. Some people think it's Jesus Christ. It could have been. But I think, too, it could have been Michael. It says that God has sent his angel. Or it could be Gabriel, one of the two. And he sent his angel, and he shut the lion's mouth. Now, if one angel could kill 135,000 people in one night, the Assyrians, then one lion can shut up some mouths of the lions. But notice this, he shut up his mouth, also hit their paws too. Had to be. Because they could have ripped Daniel to shreds with his paws just as much as their mouth. But he says that they had not hurt me. I mean, what would that have been that night? To all of a sudden have an angel appear and realize, these guys aren't going to hurt me. I mean, that would have been WrestleMania with a lion or something like that night. Something was going on. It would have been a scene. And I imagine Daniel slept very well that night. And anyway, it says that he says, "They have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocence was found in me." That is, Daniel's writing this now. Remember this. Daniel's writing this, and this is his words about himself. God has found that I was innocent. And also before me. Notice Daniel does not defend himself until after the sentence has been passed and he's been tested. That Daniel himself has been tested. He didn't seek to defend himself at any time here until after all this is over with. That's interesting. I could say more about that, but I can't. It says this, "Then was the king exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him." He didn't have one scratch or bruise or anything. Because he believed in his God. Ooh, power of faith in God. Well, it says, and the king commanded, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the dens of lions, them and their children, and their wives, and the lions had their mastery over them, and broke all their bones in pieces before they came to the bottom of the den. That tells you how hungry these guys were. And the angel must have opened their mouth. Definitely. But notice that the wives and the children. Now, the law of the Medes and the Persians was, if you accuse somebody falsely, You being now the guilty man had to suffer the same consequence, same punishment, not just you, but your family, your wives and your children. And so this wasn't God's law, but it was the Medes' laws and the Persians' laws. And so they threw him in the den. They were wiped out. But then it says, then King Darius wrote unto all the people, nations, and languages, and dwelt in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. Now, that's what kings do. They make decrees. And they force people, but that's not the way God does it. God doesn't force anybody to worship Him or follow Him. You come just as you are, on your own, realizing your need for a Savior. He doesn't force anybody. But kings do. For He is the living God and steadfast forever, and His kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and His dominion shall be ever, even unto the ends. So he had this unbelievable trust. Now, notice that the relationship that Daniel had with God versus this king. It was a legalistic kind of thing that he was forcing people to follow, and Daniel was just living his life with God. It's the difference between legalism and loving relationship with God. So he delivered and rescued, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. I mean, from the power of the lions. You can cross-reference that 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 if you want. God has delivered us from the power of the lion, Satan. And so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Now, Darius could be the same person that we just read about Cyrus. They could be the same thing. Some people think that Darius is a title rather than just a person. And that's the way this scripture would be rendered, would be translated, this verse here in verse 28, in the Aramaic, that he would be the same. And so some people say that it's the same person. If it is, then this is the same Cyrus that allowed Zerubbabel to take the captives home back to Jerusalem. And we'll read about that in chapter 9 in a few weeks from now, but we'll get there. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the blessings that you give us. Thank you, Lord. Make us Daniels, Lord. Make us men of prayer, women of prayer, men and women of faith. In Jesus' name, amen. Wait just 1 minute. Let me just run through. I need to get these things out. There's a lot of things. What made Daniel such a man? Well, he transcended time. That is, that he had a consistent life. He kept himself useful for God. He fulfilled his call. I just want to run through these real quick. That is, that he finished well, as we said. He had the right attitude. He didn't defend himself. He didn't sit around trying to defend himself. He just had the right attitude. I'm going to trust God. He was hated by the world, but not embittered by it. He was hated by the world, but not embittered by it. He was condemned for his righteousness. He was known by his virtues, even by his enemies. Faithful. He was a faithful citizen until it went against God. He was willing to face anything if it was God's will, and he even out with the outcome of it. And he left the whole thing up to God. Whatever happened to him was up to God. He served faithfully, no matter what the cost. He never defended himself. He left that to others to defend. He strengthened others. He delivered him. He was delivered from harm. God delivered him. He never took any glory. He gave it all to God. And God avenged him. And lastly, God exalted him. God prospered him. And so those are some of the things. I just needed to tell you that, and you can get the tape if you want to kind of follow up and think about those things yourself. But God bless you. I love you. And like I said, this chapter is just full of meaning, full of study. Each chapter of the Bible is that way. Amen? I mean, you just get into it over and over and over again. It's just fun. It's just fun. You know, we were getting ready to go to Israel. And my kitchen table, I've got a desk in my office. That's for Sundays and everything else. But I took over the kitchen table, and I've got everything set up with other books over there, and preparing all these messages and stuff. And it's just like, I'm just going crazy over everything. Just going from one table to another table. And I found myself last night, asleep there at the table, and getting up and then going to bed, but just realizing this is fun. Learning about God, learning about Him, getting to know Him is fantastic. Father, thank you. Bless each brother and sister in this place. I pray, Father, that you would use them this week to show your love to somebody that needs it. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. Love you.